I too made lots of notes during this. One of the things that struck me was the interconnectedness between each of the speakers. It was like a Venn diagram I was drawn. You'll be quite interested to know that John Venn actually came from Hull.
Yes. Really done your research, Jack.
So first of all, I was so struck by what Bob talked about in terms of that the older person should have the dignity of choice. Dignity is a word that I believe should be a theme in everything that we do. And then as I listened to Jane, she was talking about how we describe older people who have been hospitalized. We objectivize them. We call them bed blockers. Or we will call them the stroke in bed 14. That is completely removing dignity from the process of being part of the caring professions. So I believe one of the first things that we have to do as caring professions in medicine, nursing, and other related professions is to remind ourselves of the importance of bringing dignity to our own professions and the people that we treat. I was also struck by what Bob was talking about, and the whole concept of disruptive innovation. That really is very much the sort of TED Talks and all sorts of things. But I believe it is more than just a buzzword, and I think it challenges us all to think of things differently. When we tend to think of innovation, we tend to think of, in my world, pharmaceutical development, we tend to think of new medicines and new molecules and biologics, but I believe it's innovation in the way we do things as well. And that can be as disruptive. I would also suggest that an element of subversiveness is really important in what we try to do as well. Because the status quo is just that. It is the status quo. And we need to do our best to disrupt that and be subversive. Because when Jane was talking about policy, and the life course, it is extremely difficult to get politicians to make changes relating to the life course because they're not going to be in power in 40 years' time, so frankly they don't really care. Their main goal is to get re-elected. And we all know as healthcare professionals that chronic diseases are not responsive to electoral cycles. Your diabetes doesn't actually care what clown is in power, with due respect to any politicians here, because it will inexorably decline, or your retinal degeneration. They will inexorably progress unless the appropriate treatment is made available. And it is trying to influence policymakers, and by that I mean not just the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Housing and Labour, and all of them to recognise that a life course long-term approach is really important. And finally, I so support what Dave was talking about in terms of while we still see everything as a cost, we will only ever see it as a cost. And until we can recognise that people of all ages are an asset, we tend to, Bob talked about the developing world and the developed world, or as I like to think of it as the emerging economies and the stagnant economies. And the emerging economies where, if you're in any form of business, international business, they're where the growth is. It's where the double-digit growth is. And it's where there's far more, and I'm sure you see that in China. That's where the growth is going to be. And until we recognize that that growth is based on people, and it is investing in people that will help, will give that return on investment, only then will we recognize that truly people have capabilities and that they bring us capacity, and it's to unleash that and not just see them as a cost. But I felt that there were some wonderful themes there about healthy aging. The other thing is, just finally, Jane was talking about preaching to the choir, and we've got Tell the World and about Hull, and we're in Hull, so it is kind of preaching to the choir because everyone here knows about Hull. But I'm going to get a button which says, ask me about healthy aging, and see if anyone actually stops me and says, I'd like to know about this, because I think that's an opportunity for us to talk to people.
Jack, thank you. It's something for all of us to think about healthy aging. John, would you like to add your observations and comments?
Right. Really referring to some of the global challenges you asked us to address, and again, I don't want to be redundant, but I was looking at some of the areas that maybe we didn't explore adequately to give further thought to. One is retirement security. We know that about two-thirds of the world's population does not have a pension plan. And in many of the developed countries, people are just not saving money. The level of savings is very low. So finance is a major issue. Technology, Bob talked about technology, IT technology. I've been studying robotics, and I think there's some huge opportunities there. Companies are focusing on robotics to help older people. One area that is of great concern to us today at ARP as well is exploitation of older people. Financial exploitation. It's going on all the time. Physical exploitation, mental exploitation, neglect of older people. We mustn't forget that these things are happening. On the positive side, we hear a lot about lifelong learning. I believe that should be encouraged. People continue to learn, keep their minds active, and also enable them to continue employment after retirement, either working for a profit or working in the volunteer section. There are real opportunities there. There's no doubt that people who had physical work, have a hard life, deserve a relaxed retirement. But many of us who are fortunate that we use our brains rather than our brawn, we want to keep on working. The old dream of retiring on some beach down in Benidorm or somewhere, no longer is that exciting. We should be reminded of what Sigmund Freud said was, for human beings to have satisfaction in life, we need two things. One is work, the other is love.
John, thank you for that. We've had such a rich feast and not enough time, but I want to now give colleagues here and friends in the audience the opportunity to make some observations or specifically I'd like you to ask questions to anybody on the panel. If you could say who you'd like to respond to your question about what you have, if you like, what's resonated with you, what you've heard from the panel members this morning. And what I'll do is I'll take 3 questions and then I'll field them to the panel. So sometimes it takes a while to warm up into that, and warming up is probably not the right word to use right at the moment. But I've got 12 questions I'd love to ask, but I won't be greedy. I'll give you the opportunity. Has anyone got any questions? So there'll be one there. Any others? One here. Any others? And there. Okay, so the first 3 questions.
Hello, it's not to anyone in particular, but going back on the idea that you just suggested about getting older people back into work, can we not use the older people with their skills to teach the younger generation, the skills that they had, because I think that their skills that they had were much more better than some of the skills that we see today. So I think that they're a good goal to go back to for learning.
Thank you. Could you just say who you are, Sarah?
I'm Deborah Watkins, I'm staff nurse in recovery.
Thank you, Deborah. Let's now take Francine's question.
I'm Francine
Wait.
Jane, okay. My name is Francine Scholten. I'm working for the Medical Research Council in Uganda, and I work together with ART and other people, the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development, about the development of the social capability in medical
Can you put the microphone up to your mouth?
approaches.
Up to your mouth.
Is it on?
It's on, yes. Talk.
Okay. Jane, I would like to hear a little bit more about the capability approach and how you see this as a healthy aging approach to that.
Thanks, Francine. Third question, Judith.
Excellent, inspiring presentations. In the summary there, we talked about the influence of politicians and the role that they play. Given the perception of older people and the comment that you made right at the beginning about Dickie Bird and the experiment and what you achieved with that, what are the panel thinking about or doing in relation to ambassadors that can help influence perception and change around stereotypes of younger people, around the stereotypes around older people, to change that perception?
Thank you. Three excellent questions. So the first is about what do the panel think scope about older people teaching younger people about skills from their lifetime. John, do you want to pick that one up first?
Absolutely. Well, certainly I agree with you 100%. I don't think we do enough to take advantage of the experience and the wisdom of older people. And I think that it should become policy in organizations. Don't waste all the cumulative learning and the wisdom of the older people. Make it available to younger people who all benefit.
Does anyone want to add anything to that from the panel? Jack?
I also agree with you. I've somehow or another become one of the spokespersons in Pfizer for the older employee. And we have a program called Mentor Match, whereby younger employees can be matched with an older colleague to help them plan their careers and help them learn from perhaps the paths that we may have taken incorrectly or correctly, and help them guide them through this. I have one word of caution, however, for older employees like myself. Because you've been around the block several times, you've seen a lot of things. So you may sit in a meeting and someone comes up with what to them is a great idea. And it is really important not to sort of roll your eyes and fold your arms and say, well, yes, we tried that in 1997. And here's why it won't work. Because that really, people don't like that. And I think older employees have a lot to learn as well, which is how to modulate that and say, you know, that's really interesting. Let's think about alternatives or other ways that we might just build on that. And I think we've got a lot to learn from the enthusiasm of youth and or younger people, and younger people can learn a great deal from us. But I'm a big supporter of formalizing that, as we've done at Pfizer with the Mentor Match program, and I really think it works.
Thank you.
Let me just tell you one story. If you want a story you can use to illustrate this, about 2 years ago there was a major hurricane in New York City that flooded all the subways and closed down the subway system for several days. Turned out that the only people who knew where the appropriate valves were to empty out the subway were the retired workers.
So it could be a matter of survival for us all. The second question was about the capability approach, wanting to hear a bit more about that. And Jane, you made a lot of it. Dave, you also brought the concept of capability into your talk. So perhaps from both of you in a response to that?
That's right, Sam. It's a work in progress. The capability approach was first mentioned and written by Amartya Sen many years ago, and it's only just in the last 2 years actually been talked about in the context of ageing. And WHO and I and a number of others are trying to understand how best it could be used as a complement rather than substitutory. So it would be that and this. Right, so, but I can give you the articles, okay?
Thank you.
I was fascinated when I heard Jane talking about capabilities. We've been talking about capacity in Uganda, and I think they're close cousins or siblings. And I'm just wondering if there isn't a way of expanding or enhancing EasyCare. Because EasyCare, across your 7 domains, asks people to respond about things they can do or things they can't do, and to identify the capabilities there, and perhaps optimize those capabilities. And if there are some that are missing that we could perhaps do something about, then that is good. But if not, identify the ones that are there and optimize and maximize them.
Yeah. Well, I think we're onto something here through a number of observations, that capability isn't just about the older person, it's about the system.
Yes.
The community strength, the formal caregiving system, the physical environment and all of that. And Dave, you really, one of the big messages for me is this bit about the care flow and how we can enable technology to maximize the capabilities across the whole care circle. But yeah, so my response to that, Jack, is absolutely we must, in the way we make EasyCare useful as an intervention tool, focus on the capability and capacity agenda.
Yes, I mean, in our research and that in most others, what people want post-retirement is dignity, meaning, a meaningful life. That's sort of the social interaction and the continued engagement and finding meaning and the volunteerism. The appropriate support when health issues need to be dealt with, and so there's not a lot that you hear in the discussion of services and support for the care and the care environment of seniors that is oriented towards maybe helping folks find where they can, what they have to offer and where they can find meaning. And the more that the life, that the individual's life has meaning and has a connectedness, the more delayed it is that they're going to go declining and go hospital bed. I just want to add one more thing to the capability approach, because it just strikes me as interesting, is in infant development and infant care, the best practice and a battle worldwide is in terms of the care of infants, is to be focused on the capability of the infant, not what the infant is currently incapable of doing. So here, the best practice of infant care is to observe and understand the infant's current capability and to scaffold and support that capability, and not expect the infant to be able to do things they are currently incapable of doing. And so it strikes me we might have some things to learn from infant care as we think about senior care.
It reminds me of the story of the patient who went to see their doctor after having had a stroke and said, "Doctor, do you think I'll recover enough to be able to play the piano?" And he said, "Yeah, I think that is possible." But he said, "Well, that's great, because I couldn't play it before my stroke." So, capabilities are relative, aren't they? The last of the 3 questions was about the ambassador role. I think I want to start with John on that. I mean, John is an ambassador to the United Nations on behalf of the American Association of Retired Persons, but more than that, he is an ambassador for what it is possible to achieve through the life course at all points, in your life. John, I don't know how you want to respond to the ambassador question, but I'll leave that one with you.
You put me on the spot there. Yeah, I guess when I was young, I wanted to be a diplomat, and it took my whole life to reach this point. My role with AARP International is to interact with organizations such as this, see what we can learn from around the world. We certainly don't have all the solutions in the United States. Do advocacy work at the United Nations. We've been very busy trying to get older people recognized in the Sustainable Development Goals, working towards a convention for the protection of older people, which doesn't exist. So there's a huge task ahead of us, and I'm a very minor player in all of this, but I try to use whatever diplomatic skills I've learned around the world to further these interests.
Isn't it great? Well, as one gets on in life, whatever age, we can be so, influential and using life skills. So, comments from other members of the panel, I'll say further embarrassment to you, John, but about the ambassador.
Look, I think it's a good question, and can I put a different twist on it? If there could be a conversation about age and not talk about age, that's the best ambassadorial process you can have. Because as soon as you actually say, I'm the ambassador for older people, then you've almost started the process of questioning and discrimination. Because, do we have an ambassador for youth who is 15? Why do we need an ambassador for older people who is 80 or 90? Surely a human, forget the age, forget the chronological age, can represent who they are just by what they do. Does that make sense? Having a conversation about, if someone asks me how old I am, it's none of their business. I am who I am, except when I go to China, when it's important for them to put it on their newspapers. But I think IFA has thought about this ambassador badge, and there is value, and yet I'm concerned that we get trapped into putting a box around a person and an age. So I think it's got pros and cons.
Thank you. So, Jack and Dave?
Very interested in your question, and interestingly that John now works with the ARP, which used to be known as the American Association of Retired Persons. They have rebranded themselves as the American Association of Real Possibilities. And I feel that helps to start breaking down that stereotype. We ran a project as part of the Get Old program, which I think also, it was originally designed 3 years ago to start a dialogue with the general public about attitudes to aging. And I think that starts to break down those stereotypes. When people start talking, we had an incredible response, but we also had an incredible response from employees within Pfizer, writing about what they felt. We're now in its third iteration, and we're talking about the fear of getting old and trying to, or FOGO, and trying to get people to really talk about how they see aging. And it's only when you start talking about it that I think you start to break that down. The people who have a much clearer view of aging, in fact we've talked about them a lot today, are caregivers. Caregivers have a much better, more insightful and more informed and enlightened approach to aging, and I believe that caregivers are a tremendous resource that we should be using. But we did, in terms of talking about age, we ran a program last year, the second version of Get Old, and it was called Claim Your Age Day, where we gave everyone a great big sign and it says, I am, and you could write it in a magic marker, hold it there, like you were getting your mugshot done, and have your picture taken. And there's an enormous screen in Times Square in New York City where it was then put up there, and people were really excited. People were really excited to see themselves, 24 feet tall, and to be holding their age. And we had one. She was supposedly a celebrity spokesperson. I'd never heard of her, but anyway. But lots of people really started to talk about their age, and I think that started to break down the taboo, because the taboo of not being able to ask your age in the employment environment in the United States is because of fear of ageism. Yeah. And I think that in some ways perpetuates it. For the record, I'm 62.
There are, in terms of getting the voice of blank, voice of the customer, there are methods and approaches we use commercially to bring customers together to really listen, to have that direct conversation. The voice of the senior, there's by some count well more than 200,000 organizations of seniors for seniors around the world, and I personally believe they're very underutilized in terms of taking the leaders from those organizations and have them sit down in front of decision makers on topics and just have a frank conversation. And it's quite in the analogy that businesses sit down and listen to their customers. When you have an inside the circle discussion, like my man was sitting in the room today, the role of ambassador or speaking to the senior, maybe come across as very parochial and interest group oriented. But I just have to think that the senior for senior grassroots organizations or locally organized organizations have individuals that can be tapped to broaden the dialogue and to bring more of a grassroots, genuine, honest, not lobbyist tainted kind of discussion voice into this discussion.
Can I come?
Yeah, Bob, I'd like Bob to have then the last word on this topic, as we've been along the panel. We'll end with Bob, and then we'll have to wind up.
The question, as I heard it, was originally couched in terms of dealing with stereotypes. And I think one of the things we teach as a principle in geriatrics is that as people age, there's greater variation, not less. And one of the issues is that when you talk about norms for aging, they're very different for these different populations that we were talking about earlier. The age of older people as a market who are still in their active consumption phase, who are going to be traveling and needing all sorts of recreation to fill up all these idle hours because they're not doing profitable or useful volunteer work, is a very different construct from the frail older people. And one of the problems that we've seen in the past with these efforts, and it was largely around discussions about prevention, is the phenomenon of what we call blaming the victim. As you develop this mindset that older